So the question is Christianity idolatry? Well, let's ask and find out.
In today's video, you will see a rabbi going around Israel asking Christians questions to see if it's idolatry. In this video, I'm going to destroy his weak attack on Christianity. Then, I'm going to show you how to use the Old Testament to turn the tables on rabbis like this. After that, I'll tell you who posted this video. You can't make this up.
Where are you from?
New York.
Your mother Jewish?
No.
In case you're wondering, he's asking those questions about where he's from and if his mother's Jewish to see if he's a Jew. If he is, then he would bring him back to the truth, so to speak. If he isn't, then, well, let's watch and find out.
What's your religion?
I'm technically a Christian.
And there we have it. A real Christian does not say, I'm technically a Christian. You are either a Christian or you are not. By hearing his response, you can already assume this is someone who is not serious about his faith. Don't be this guy, or things like this will happen.
I want to ask you a question about the Christian religion. They say that a man was crucified 2,000 years ago, and they buried him, and he's going to come back to life. Right? Is that what they say?
They say.
All right, one big problem here. The rabbi asks, they say that a man was crucified 2,000 years ago. Who says that? That's a minor detail, but important for you to catch when you watch things like this. Christians do not say that, not in this way anyway. The first problem here is that he's focused solely on Jesus as a man. It's obvious he doesn't believe Jesus was God, but he cannot take his belief and assume it to be true when talking to someone who doesn't. This would be like me quoting the New Testament as authoritative over him as a Jew who rejects it. So when I turn the tables on this rabbi later, remember I said I'm going to use the Old Testament. Because if he is a real Jew and not technically a Jew, he is bound by the Old Testament. He cannot run away from what the Old Testament says. This rabbi is coming from the position that Christians believe Jesus was a man and became God. That would be Mormon theology, which is dodgy on so many levels. Christians believe the opposite. We believe God took physical form by entering creation and becoming man. He's got it totally mixed up. So yes, a man was crucified 2,000 years ago, but not any man, the God man.
Let's say that you saw that man, he came back to life and he's walking down the street here. Would you say, there goes God?
Maybe. I don't know. Sure.
Sure.
Maybe. I don't know. Sure. I'm happy you got there in the end. But people like this rabbi prey upon a lack of confidence and knowledge. This is why it's important to learn your faith. These encounters turn from faith busters to faith boosters. These become opportunities at sharing the gospel and bringing people to Christ. If you notice though, the rabbi creates this hypothetical. Let's say Jesus was crucified and then you see him after. Would you say, there goes God? Remember John 20 verse 28? The disciple Thomas wanted to see Jesus' wounds. And Jesus appears to the disciples. And when Thomas sees him, he says to Jesus, my Lord and my God. That's exactly what the New Testament tells us. That was for us as Christians. Now, if I was talking to this rabbi or any rabbi asking this question, I'd say, you see in Genesis 18, where verse 1 says Hashem, the name, appeared to Abraham. For sake of time, I want to read 2 verses and then ask you a question. Is that okay?
Sure.
Are you sure?
Sure.
Good. Okay. Genesis 18 verse 22 says, and the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And then after this back and forth, the chapter ends in verse 33 saying, and the Lord went his way as soon as he had left communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. It says that, right?
Sure.
In both of those verses, it says Hashem, the name of God, not Elohim, right?
Sure.
Okay, this is the question. When Abraham saw that man walking away as he went back to his tent, would Abraham say, there goes God?
Sure.
How did I know you would say that? Genesis 18 is only one example of God appearing as a man. God isn't limited to our feelings. The fact is, Genesis 18 is clear. God appears as a man, and you know what they say about facts, right? Facts don't care about your feelings. But let's continue. The Christian said, sure, if he saw Jesus walking down the street after crucifixion, like the disciple Thomas, he would say, there goes God. Now let's see the rabbi's response.
But he's a man. Can you explain that to me?
I can't.
We've already established in either testament in the Bible that God appearing as a man is not a problem. God showed us this from the first book in the Bible. Abraham didn't say, you can't be God because you're a man. He acknowledged him as the judge of the whole earth. He never once said, "But you're a man." That's not how Abraham handled the encounter. Is it a surprise someone who says they're technically Christian can't answer? But you think the rabbi has never read Genesis 18? Of course he has, and explains the clear passage away to avoid its power.
But you'd call him God.
Yeah, I assume so.
Seems so.
I'd call him God, like Thomas did, and like Abraham did when he saw God in the flesh.
There's one God who's infinite.
Okay.
The infinite God is everywhere. That man is not everywhere. Only worship the infinite God.
All right.
Okay?
Noted.
Notice the assumption: an infinite God cannot appear in a finite location and still be God. God never said anything like that. In fact, Genesis shows that God can be everywhere but in one place at the same time. Rabbi, have you read Genesis 19, verse 24?
Sure.
I don't think you have. If you're arguing God is infinite and thus cannot appear as a man, that totally debunks what you just said to this Christian. Let me read it and remind you of what it says. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. Moses tells us that the infinite God was in heaven and on earth as a man at the same time. It's in the first book of the Torah, Rabbi. The 5 books of Moses.
Sure.
The first book of the Torah, Rabbi. The 5 books of Moses.
The question is, was he God?
Yes.
You think that, what's his name?
Jesus.
He is God?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want. Do you pray to him?
To Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that man who was crucified is God?
Yeah. You know,
He thinks
you
he's
know
God.
those
Is that man that was crucified God?
Yes.
Do you pray to that man?
Yes.
You worship that man?
Yes. Of course.
That's idolatry.
If that's idolatry, then Abraham was an idolater. And we know that isn't true. You see the difference when people answer the same questions with confidence?
Sure.
He doesn't know what to do. Now imagine what would happen when someone turned the tables on him. These weak arguments would get totally destroyed. Anything he asks about Jesus backfires when we go to the Old Testament. But before I forget, this short was posted on a Muslim social media. It backfired like when a sheikh mocked a Christian but ended up embarrassing himself. You are going to watch that video next, right?
Sure.